They called him the Golden Boy, a digital savior who promised to heal a broken world with the precision of code and the heart of a saint. Sam Bankman-Fried didn't look like the billionaires we knew. No suits, just a man on a beanbag chair. He spoke of effective altruism, the idea that one should make as much money as possible simply to give it all away. In the Bahamas, he built FTX. It wasn't just an exchange, it was a crusade. Millions followed his lead. They trusted him with their futures. But while the world saw a visionary, the archive was beginning to see a thief. Deep beneath the code, Sam was building something the world was never meant to see. A secret back door. The back door wasn't a mistake. It was a choice. A single line of code, written by co-founder Gary Wang, that changed everything. It was a simple command. This wasn't just technical jargon. It was a license to steal from the very people who trusted the platform. While your funds were supposedly safe in the vault, they were actually flowing through a digital tunnel directly into Alameda Research. Sam's private hedge fund became a bottomless pit, fueled by the life savings of millions. A machine designed to siphon wealth in the dark. Nishad Singh and the inner circle watched the numbers climb, justified by a greater good. But there were no auditors, no board of directors, just a group chat and a secret that was beginning to bleed the world dry. The architect's machine was now a drain. The back door was the engine, but the shield was a philosophy. Effective altruism. SBF told the world he was getting rich only to give it all away. Earn to give. It was a brilliant psychological defense. Who would question a saint while they were busy saving the world? Inside his circle, it felt like a cult. Young, brilliant minds convinced they were the only ones who could save humanity. They used utilitarian logic to justify any risk. If the end goal was saving billions, what were a few necessary lies along the way? But while they discussed the far future, they were destroying the present. The moral shield was finally beginning to crack. The real cost was about to be felt by the very people they claimed to protect. The global damage was just beginning. The numbers on a screen are easy to ignore, but the archive records faces, not just figures. The damage of the architect's machine was measured in human lives. In Nigeria, crypto was survival against a falling currency. Students put their tuition in SBF's hands. Families saved for medical care. When the vault door slammed shut, those lives were put on hold. No refunds, no recourse. Just the cold silence of a Bahamian server room. In India, small business owners found their working capital frozen overnight. The engine of their livelihood was suddenly stopped by a billionaire's gamble. The betrayal wasn't just financial, it was psychological. People felt foolish for trusting a saint. The resulting shame was corrosive. It was a transfer of wealth from those with the least to an elite circle living in a dream. But the world was finally waking up. The reckoning was near. The silence of the archive was finally broken by the sound of handcuffs. In December 2022, the Bahamian authorities arrested the man who would be king. Sam Bankman-Fried was no longer a visionary. He was a prisoner. Extradited to the United States, he faced a barrage of federal charges: wire fraud, money laundering, conspiracy. The architect of shadows was now facing the full weight of the laws he thought he was above. But the most damaging evidence didn't come from the code. It came from his inner circle. Those who shared his bed and his secrets had flipped. Caroline Ellison's testimony was the final nail. She detailed the secret meetings, the shared spreadsheets, and the direct orders to use customer funds. The defense tried to paint him as a well-meaning bumbler, but the jury was about to see the calculation behind the chaos. The verdict was near: guilty on all 7 counts. The jury didn't take long to see through the beanbag chairs and the floppy hair. They saw the calculation behind the chaos. The architect of shadows was finally brought into the light of justice. The Golden Boy was now officially a federal felon. 25 years in federal prison. A life sentence for the trust he betrayed and the lives he dismantled in his pursuit of a digital utopia. The gates closed on a multi-billion-dollar empire managed on a group chat. The world's youngest billionaire was now an inmate. The judge's warning was clear. This wasn't about the complexity of crypto. It was about old-fashioned greed and the dangerous hubris of being above the law. The empire wasn't just built on code. It was built on a circle of trust that was now disintegrating. One by one, the people who knew Sam's secrets were choosing their own survival. Caroline Ellison provided the roadmap. She detailed the private meetings in the penthouse, where the decision to use customer money was discussed with the casual air of a college project. They shared spreadsheets that didn't balance. They shared a bed. And now, they shared the details of a multi-billion-dollar fraud with the world's most powerful prosecutors. Gary Wang confirmed the code's lethal flaw. He admitted that at Sam's direction, he had personally ensured Alameda Research could never be liquidated, no matter how much they lost. The architect was becoming increasingly isolated. The hubris of thinking they were untouchable had left him alone in a courtroom, facing the very people he once called friends. But while the inner circle crumbled, another layer of the facade was waiting to be exposed. The legitimacy Sam had bought in the halls of power. He wasn't just buying penthouses, he was buying legitimacy. SBF became one of the largest political donors in Washington, playing both sides of the aisle. He funneled tens of millions into campaigns, positioning himself as the adult in the room who wanted regulation. It was a masterclass in lobbying. He used customer funds to pay for his seat at the table. While users thought their money was safe, it was being spent to influence the laws of the land. The access he bought gave him a shield. It made the world trust him even more. A billionaire who wanted to be regulated was the perfect cover. He testified before Congress, presenting himself as the face of responsible crypto. But the archive knows that access is not the same as integrity. While he lobbied for rules in public, he was breaking every rule in private. It was time for Alameda to gamble the world's wealth. While FTX was the face of the empire, Alameda Research was its secret engine, a hedge fund with a singular purpose: to gamble with money that didn't belong to it. Alameda was given a special status. While other traders were liquidated when their bets failed, Sam's hedge fund had an unlimited line of credit. Your credit. To hide the debt, they used FTT, FTX's own token. They inflated its value, using it as collateral for billions in loans. A fortune built on thin air. It was market manipulation on a grand scale. They bought their own supply to keep the price high, creating a fake pillar of stability for a crumbling empire. But a house of cards requires the wind to stay still. When the market turned, the debt became a trap. The engine was now a drain, sucking the world dry. The architect's secrets were finally breaking the surface. The shadow was spreading, and a global contagion was about to begin. The shadow of FTX was long, and it wasn't just Sam's empire that was caught in it. As the liquidity dried up, the dominoes began to fall. One by one, the pillars of the industry toppled. Contagion is a clinical term for a financial nightmare. BlockFi, once seen as a stable lender, was the first to realize that the rescue Sam promised was just another layer of the trap. He had positioned himself as the industry's lender of last resort, the JP Morgan of crypto. But you cannot save others when you are burning your own customer's house down. The panic wasn't confined to a single exchange. It was a crisis of trust that paralyzed the entire digital economy. Institutional giants found themselves exposed to the architect's shadow. Millions more found their assets frozen, not because they used FTX, but because the platforms they trusted had trusted Sam Bankman-Fried. The circle of ruin was widening. The world was reeling from the contagion, but the archive was looking deeper, into the twisted relationship between a king and his private bank, into the heart of Alameda. The architect's empire wasn't just digital, it was physical. A $30 million penthouse in the Bahamas, serving as a fortress for the inner circle. They called it a college dorm for the elite. A place where beanbag chairs sat next to multi-million-dollar views, and where the rules of the world felt distant and irrelevant. In this bubble, the lines between personal and professional wealth blurred into nothing. They lived on your money, convinced they were still the underdogs. Decisions that affected millions were made in encrypted group chats. A multi-billion-dollar fraud was managed with the casual air of a social event. The disconnect was total. While they discussed saving the future of humanity, they were spending the present of their customers. The facade was absolute, but the penthouse wasn't enough. They needed the world's most famous faces to sell the lie. It was time for the siren song of celebrity. The penthouse was the inner sanctum, but to the world, Sam presented a different face, one endorsed by the most trusted names in sports and entertainment. He bought the naming rights to a stadium in Miami. He hired the legends of the field and the skeptics of comedy to sell his vision of the future. The message was simple. FTX was the safe way to join the revolution. It was a siren song, designed to drown out the silence of the empty vault. He spent tens of millions on a single Super Bowl commercial, a play for legitimacy that brought in millions of ordinary people who just wanted to believe. He paid for their fame so you would pay for his lie. But as the archive remembers, fame is a poor substitute for liquidity. The spotlight was about to turn into a searchlight. The campaign had worked. The world was watching. But as the spotlight intensified, the shadows grew deeper. The music was about to stop. The architect didn't just steal money, he stole time. The billions that vanished were the very funds promised to protect the future of humanity. Hundreds of research projects on pandemic prevention and AI safety were suddenly defunded. Scientists found their life's work halted overnight. It was the ultimate betrayal of his own philosophy. By building his shield out of the world's most urgent causes, he ensured their failure when his lie collapsed. Thousands of jobs were lost. Decades of collective research time were deleted. The debt of his effective altruism is a weight we still carry today. His story is a warning to every dreamer. Progress cannot be built on a foundation of fraud, no matter how noble the intended destination. The labs were silent, but the psychological toll was deafening. The world was left with a crisis of trust that no court could resolve. The story of SBF is more than a legal case. It is a warning about the next architect who will promise to save us. The shadows remain. The world moves on. New saviors emerge, carrying new philosophies and new tools of disruption. The cycle of trust and betrayal continues. Each wave of innovation brings a new mask. We are drawn to the vision, yet we often forget to look at the foundation until it begins to crumble. In the digital age, our dependence on the architect grows. We trade our sovereignty for the promise of a more efficient, more effective world. But true sovereignty doesn't come from trusting a man on a beanbag chair. It comes from the code you can verify for yourself. We must be the guardians of our own futures, because in the end, blindness is a luxury we can no longer afford. The final lesson is here. The story of the architect of shadows is now part of the final record. A legacy of hubris, betrayal, and a cost that continues to be paid by millions. The archive exists because humanity forgets. We store the truths that are too heavy to carry, so they may serve as a beacon for those who follow. True sovereignty is not a gift. It is a responsibility. It is the refusal to follow the siren song of the next visionary without looking at their code. The truth survives the dark. It is the only thing that remains when the lights of the penthouse fade and the cell doors lock. I am the archivist. I have recorded the rise and the ruin, and I will be here for the next chapter of our digital history.